Hello, you're listening to An Artist's Happy Hour, a podcast produced by the AT&T Performing Arts Center. I'm your host, Matt Lyle. In this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with playwright Jack Heifner. Jack's from Corsicana, Texas, and is a graduate of SMU. Jack wrote the play Vanities, which ran for 1,785 performances off-Broadway from 1976 to 1980. He's had scores of other successful plays, Bargains, Patio, Porch, to name a couple. He's written for Broadway and television, including Designing Women, a personal favorite of mine, and he's had shows in London's West End. Jack lives in New York, but spends every spring semester at Stephen F. Austin State University, where he's the playwright in residence. That's where I caught up to him. He's a font of great stories, humor, and advice, as you'll hear here. Without further ado, here is Jack Heifner. Hello, Jack Heifner. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Matt?
Good. I'm really good. Considering.
Yes.
You know,
I know.
Life's a little more complicated than it was, but
Absolutely.
I still feel well, so that's good. Now we go back to the year 2001. This is for the folks at home. At Stephen F. Austin, where I went to college, you were the playwright in residence, or still are the playwright in residence there and professor. You cast me in the first semester at the Festival of New American Plays, and I got to work with you and hang out with David Ives afterwards because we were doing his play. And I have to tell you that was really formative for me in many ways. First of all, because I started college with such a great, fun experience there. And secondly, it really set the way that I like to work really in a room. I like to have a good time. You always were very pleasant and, trying to make everybody as comfortable as possible. And then being able to talk to David Ives and see the type of work that he was doing gave me confidence that I could, write comedies someday. So thank you for that. Now, you lived spring semesters in Nacogdoches, correct?
Correct.
And then the rest of the time in New York.
Right.
So my first question for you is, what is that like, switching between the two things?
Well,
they're slightly different environments in my
slightly
experience.
different, and I like it just because it is so different. I mean, I'm in this huge city, and then I get to come down here to this small town. I had never, when I first came to Nacogdoches to teach, I had never been to Nacogdoches in my life, and I grew up in Texas, so I'd heard of it. But when I got the job here, I had been here just to visit, just to see the department. But other than that, and that was on my way back from California where I was living, and I was moving back to New York and stopped through Texas.
Mhm.
And so they offered me this job, and I kind of said, well, for how long? And they said, well, as long as you want it. So 23 years later, I'm still coming here. Yes. I had just started in 97, right before you got here. And the first play festival was 98. So you were actually in the second one.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
2001.
And it was still, we were still, every time I do it now, I'm still experimenting with what we're doing, and how to do it. But yeah, so I spent part of my year in Texas and part in New York, and that was on purpose in the beginning because, like you, I grew up in Texas, and I've written so much about Texas that I thought, I wonder what it'd be like to put myself back here.
Yeah.
And do I have anything else to say about Texas? And I have had some more to say about Texas. But I and also at the time, I thought, well, it'd be interesting to be a little closer to family for a while. 23 years later, I'm
right.
still for a while anyway. But it's just enough time for me to be down here that I don't get tired of it or crazy or anything.
Yeah.
And I get to go back to New York and be crazy there.
Yeah, a different type of crazy.
Different type of crazy, yes.
Yeah. So what was do you remember the first play that you wrote?
Yes, very much so, because I didn't plan to be a writer like so many writers. I had a good education, I thought, at SMU, like we try to do at Stephen F. Austin. You learn a little bit about everything, and because you don't know what you're going to end up doing, really. So I had a really wonderful creative writing teacher at SMU, where I went to school, but I didn't have any idea I was going to end up writing. And so I had done just about everything you can do in the theater in New York. Been an actor, worked backstage, worked everywhere, and I was sort of checking things off the list. Don't want to do that the rest of my life. Don't want to do that. About the only thing left was playwriting in the theater that I hadn't done.
Yeah.
I mean, I had stage managed, I directed. So the first play I wrote took me several years to write because I kept putting it away and saying, "Oh, I'm not a writer; it's no good."
Uh-huh.
And then finally, what made me finally do it was I had this great office job, like most people in the theater have office jobs or
Yes.
waiter jobs. And I had this job, and I decided if I didn't quit that job because they had just offered me a promotion, like heading a department and
Wow.
a lot of money. And I said, if I don't get out of here now,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to be stuck here forever. So I quit on New Year's Eve and said the next year I'm going to just wing it and see if I can be a playwright. And I sent the first play out, and by April of that year, I had offers for 2 productions.
Oh,
So I
wow.
was really lucky
Yeah.
because it happened fast.
Uh-huh.
But it could have taken another 10 years. But I was just lucky that the 2 places I sent it to both offered me productions. And I had to choose between 2 great New York theaters doing it. And I ended up with Playwrights Horizons,
Mm-hmm.
which it had just started business then and still in business. So, but the first play was took a long time. Nothing
Yeah.
since has taken that long. You know.
Yeah. Once you learn how
Yeah.
you do it, then you can
Yeah.
just do it. Yeah.
And I think I've said this to you before, but it was a comedy, a really sick comedy. And when I heard people laugh, I just couldn't believe they were laughing at what I wrote.
Uh-huh.
And that was the greatest gift. And I went back, and it taken me like 2 years to write the first play. Because of that response, I went back and in 2 days wrote the next play, which was Vanities.
Oh, wild. You wrote Vanities in 2
A
days.
day and a half, really.
Oh, crazy.
I know. So
That's insane.
I know. So the
Yeah.
one, that became the biggest hit was the one
Uh-huh.
that was the fastest to write. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was because too, the first play had a lot of characters. And I said,
Yeah.
I'm trying to deal with too many characters. I'm gonna write a play with just 3 characters. And that was what I was, my intention was just to write a very simple play with 3 characters, as opposed to dealing with a cast of 8, I think, that I had in the first
Yeah. That's good advice for me.
play. So,
I need to start dropping characters off of. It's also so much easier to produce.
yes,
That
these
helps.
days.
It takes, yeah, the overhead is,
Yeah.
so many things that you see out there, people asking for plays is 5 or fewer characters,
Yes.
and sometimes it's a little hard to tell a story in 5 or fewer characters. Not every story
Sure.
is going to work that way. So,
No, so and that was not. Now, yes, I agree with you. Theaters and producers want smaller casts because
mhm.
of their because of finances. But back then, it was just because I felt like it, every time we write something, I'm kind of giving myself an exercise.
Mhm.
And that exercise was I'm going to write just a play for 3 characters, and that's where I started.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to
And
think
I,
about it. An exercise.
but you know,
Yeah.
quite frankly, I didn't because that play was still a Texas play. The first play was called Casserole, and it was about
Well, that was a Texas play too, I assume, right?
yes, and it
Casseroles.
was
Okay.
about the amount of food a family is consuming at a funeral, and they don't want to bury daddy because the food from the neighbors will stop once the funeral's over.
So they stretch it out. Just stretch stretch
Yes.
it out.
It's still a funny idea,
Yeah, it is fantastic.
but and
Do
it's
they buy
not
a
a
deep freeze?
yeah, well, finally, I can't remember. I didn't even remember now what what happened that they finally did it, but they finally buried Daddy, and they went into more mourning then because they had no more. The casseroles stopped from the. But I love, I think all of us that grew up in Texas find casseroles funny. I
Oh my
love,
gosh.
you just put them in the last play of yours.
I've had casseroles in 2 of my plays now. Yeah.
So it always cracks me up. But I
Casseroles
love them.
is Casserole is a Southern love language.
Yes, yes.
If you love somebody, put 3 layers of cheese on top of whatever you're feeding them, and they'll know how much
It's
you care
true.
for them. You don't have to say it. Now, Vanities ran for several years off Broadway.
Right. It was
And
about 5 years.
yeah, so I'm sure that changed your life pretty dramatically, huh?
It did change my life in the sense that the first casserole I sent out, I had productions then by April or whatever of that play. Turned around and wrote Vanities and Playwrights Horizons. I remember them saying to me that because they didn't have that many writers at that point, um, I thought, well, they would do it. And they said, well, it's not a play about anything. And I said, it's a play about lives that are not about anything.
Yeah.
And so they did it. And that went into rehearsal that December and opened off Broadway. Well, it opened in a workshop, and then the workshop had 12 performances and it was picked up to go off Broadway. So by March of the next year, really less than a year, I had a off Broadway hit.
Wow.
So I know. I mean,
And then
I could still be sitting in that office doing market research if I hadn't quit.
yeah, you certainly could.
I know. So it
Wow.
happened very quickly, and then I had to deal with this sort of instant success, and also the feeling that can I top it?
Yeah.
And also everything we write, we have to think. I think the next thing we write's going to be better than what we've written,
Mm-hmm.
and I think a lot of plays I've written since then are better plays, but
Yeah.
it happened to be the right play at the right time
Right.
and all of that. So
Yeah.
it was a lot of, as we know, a lot of this business is luck,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just lucky there right at the beginning. Or I may have given it a couple of years and quit and changed careers again if it
Yeah.
hadn't happened fairly fast. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. I've, of course, as a writer, have never had a 5-year off Broadway show, though I would love one if anybody is listening. But I really get off on telling the next story. Like I know that I will make a limited amount of money. I'm fortunate enough that I do make money um, with everything that I work on in some way.
right.
But just telling that next story and getting it out there and figuring out the puzzle to put it all together and discover who these characters are it's a reward for me personally.
Mhm.
But I would prefer a 5-year run as a
Well,
reward.
the thing I think there were one problem with a 5-year run is you think, oh, all of them are going to run 5 years. Well, no.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
The next thing that opened the third play I wrote then opened on Broadway and lasted 2 weeks.
Right.
So it was a real lesson in be thankful for what you've got, but it
Hmm.
also that long run and sort of the many productions allowed me to write some failures
Yeah.
that were important to me to
Hmm.
write as plays, but were not popular hits.
Yeah.
So so it was a great luxury for that time. I don't think it could even happen now because of economics.
Yeah.
But that show cost, when we opened it off Broadway for the 12 performances for the workshop, cost $200. And we spent $200 on sets and costumes, and then it moved off Broadway. So I think it costs $5,000 or $6,000 to move it off Broadway, and that's just uh,
Hmm.
theater rental and stuff. the same costumes and set that cost $200 were still on stage 5 years later. Well, I think we replaced some of the costumes,
Some of them, sure.
you know,
Yeah.
but I mean, it was instantly in profits because it cost so little, and it cost nothing to run.
Hmm.
And so it actually put Playwrights Horizons and the theater company we had started, allowed them to do a lot of work because it
Yeah.
was financing those companies and making money for them, which is the best gift, so that it allowed so many other people to work.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Did the same three actresses stay?
No, the original cast, well, they stayed a long time.
Hmm.
One of the original cast members was Kathy Bates, and Kathy and I had gone to SMU together,
Hmm.
along with the director of the show, the designers. So it's a real SMU group.
Yeah,
And
that's cool.
com- combined with, we had a lot of us been at the American Shakespeare Festival in Stratford, Connecticut. So when we started our theater company, it was about 10 people from SMU and about 10 from Stratford. And so Vanities was actually a co-production then of our new theater company and Playwrights Horizons. We just put our name on it just so that, because we were starting.
Uh-huh.
And so it actually ended up, then we got our own theater and all of that as a result of the money we're making. But also because it's weird that something that could cost $200 in New York, by the time you're getting to Los Angeles and it's got stars in it, their costumes alone are costing $10,000.
Yeah.
The same costume.
It's just a
but
cheerleader costume. Yeah.
but the sweater's got to be cashmere,
Right.
and it's got to be from Saks Fifth Avenue, and
Yeah.
and all this because you're dealing with stars, and not that they're egos, but but it was just so weird to see how much more expensive it got suddenly to do the
Uh-huh.
show in different places with
Yeah.
salaries, of major names making, so much more money than I was making. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I bet. Now, you said that Vanities is not your favorite play of yours, or you think is even your best play. It's
right.
just the one that hit at the right time, right place.
Mhm.
What is your favorite, or you think your best? Those could be different plays. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Um, there's a play of mine. I did well, not long, 6 years in California, living in the early '90s, and I was doing television. But oddly enough, writing, I think, some of the best plays I've ever written, alternating between television and playwriting. And
Mhm.
also, I found the theater scene in LA, the kind of off Broadway scene, more like the old New York scene. You could do things for basically nothing. But I wrote a play out there that, to this day, I still can't figure out how I wrapped my head around it, because it took place. Um, Someone had written a book, and then he dies, and the friends of the person get together for a memorial service and read the book, and it's totally a lie about their relationships.
Ah, yeah.
So they are furious, but the guy's dead. So they go back and they play this. They play the scene from the book, which is a little bit sort of exaggerated, over the top. They play the way it really happened, and
Uh-huh.
then they discuss it in the now, you know. And
Right.
I don't even know how I did it, because I didn't outline it or anything. It was just one of those times, you wrap your head around something and you just go with it.
Hmm.
And I think it's the most complex structurally, the most complex play I've ever written. It's never done because it was really a play of its time, because at that time with the AIDS epidemic,
Hmm.
everybody was writing their AIDS play, and they all went into a stack on someone's desk. Well, how many plays can we do about that? You know, so it had a,
Like
yes,
three.
yes,
Three, I
and
think.
one
Tony
theater,
Kushner had two of them. And
yes.
yeah.
So it had a very good run in Los Angeles and won awards out there, but had a New York production that wasn't very good, and it was done a few other places. But then it seems now like it doesn't hold up about the time. I
Yeah.
would have
Yeah.
to completely redo it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Everything ages.
yeah.
Now, uh, how do you feel when you see a production of yours that you don't think is very good?
Well, there were a lot of productions of
I
Vanities
bet.
that weren't good, and I kind of stopped going for
Hmm.
because you're very grateful they're doing it, but some of them are just terrible. So I stopped for a long time going to see them. And then recently, I mean, in the last 10 years, I think I've enjoyed a few productions I've seen. There was one in Fort Worth at the theater, I think where you've worked. What is the name of that theater in Fort Worth? The
Circle.
Circle. They
Hmm.
did a wonderful production,
Oh
and
yeah, they're good.
they're
They're good
good.
people over there. Hmm.
Yeah, and I saw that. It's maybe still 8 or 10 years ago, but they did a good production, and every now and then I'll go see one, but it's hard for me to do it. And then also, then we in the last 10 years we did a musical version of it,
Yes.
and so I was more involved with writing the musical,
Hmm.
which also has a fourth act. The play only has three scenes. The musical has a fourth scene where they're
Uh-huh.
40 years old. So it
Okay.
takes them up to not now, but much later in their lives. And the musical was musicals are so hard to do that it
Yeah.
took a long time to get it right. We did four productions before I think we got it right, and they were
Hmm.
big productions. So, but anyway, but
Yeah.
I happen to like the musical a lot now, but that's because we did it in we did it in Palo Alto, then we did it in Pasadena, then we did it at Second Stage in New York, and then we did it in Seattle, and we finally got it right in Seattle. But the best production was London. And
Uh-huh.
London absolutely nailed it. So um, who knew?
Interesting. With British actors.
With British actors, you know what it is? I
Playing Southern girls,
Southern, and they were getting
Texas.
they weren't getting the accent totally right at times.
No,
But,
no, we don't get the British accent right,
no.
and I know personally that British people don't get the Texas accent right
But
either.
you know what they did is I think we have a tendency in the United States doing musicals of casting singers who act. They cast actors who sing.
Yeah, there you go.
And this production, they acted the hell out of it. I mean, it was so good. And they were all great singers too. And they were all, big West End performers,
Uh-huh.
like from Wicked and stuff. But they were such good actors. And not that the people who did in the United States, the first cast we ever had in the United States had great people in it, Megan Hilty and Sarah Stiles. And if we could have kept them together, but it's hard to keep a cast together when they're being offered Broadway shows.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, but the London production, I thought the play was right when we did it in Seattle, the script and the music. But then it took that extra production in London for me to say, okay, I had nothing to do with it, not like the rest of them. I had no input. I just
Hmm.
walked in and saw it and thought, oh, they got it right, and they didn't even have to ask me anything. So
Yeah,
so shut up, just let them do it.
that's a good feeling.
I know.
Yeah, yeah. Early on, I was very deferential in
Mm,
new performance, new productions. When
mm,
like what do I know? And then I learned pretty quickly to be hands on and be there just to make sure everything is getting done the right way, or at least the way I feel is right. It which is closer, in my experience, has been closer to right than when I leave it completely alone.
yes, and I
You know.
think I think that's what happened with the musical in Palo Alto and in Pasadena and in New York. I didn't I didn't step in enough when
Yeah.
because it's so collaborative, and directors tell you to cut something and you don't fight for it. So when I got to Seattle, I had a wonderful director out there who runs the Fifth Avenue Theater in Seattle and is used to doing musicals, but he had directed Vanities when he was in college. with Faith Prince of all people, and he said,
Hmm.
"What you've done is you need to put more of the play back. You've cut too much."
Mm-hmm.
And he was the first person who knew the play well enough to tell me, this is what you need to put back in. And this is what, and I felt like I suddenly had someone who was, a dramaturg, right? Someone
Yeah.
working to help me do it, as opposed to directors and choreographers just saying, can we get rid of that?
Mm-hmm.
We don't need that. We need a more musical, we need more dancing here, not talking.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I got the right director there, and who really helped me. Yeah.
That's
So,
good.
yeah. Yeah.
That's
So,
good. Now, here's a question for all writers, from anybody who doesn't write. Where do you get your ideas?
well, I tell my students, keep your ears open and your eyes open, because I've had ideas come from, a lot of times, from newspapers, from the news, um, from people. I overhear a conversation. Someone called me once from my hometown and said flying saucers had landed, and yes, I said, "Oh, really?" But that set me off,
Uh-huh.
writing, and I don't know. I just think you have to be sort of in tune with what's going on, or open for inspiration. I've written plays based on paintings,
Mm-hmm.
that I'll see.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. What play of yours is a
well,
painting? I would love to
uh,
check it out and see how it.
it's not. I never finished that play,
Uh,
but it was based on a painting at the Tate in London called "The Death of Chatterton," and um, I've still got all this work on Lord Chatterton. But what it was a boy who, it's a beautiful painting, who killed himself like at 18 because he thought he wasn't successful enough. Yeah, and I thought, if this is not
Jeez,
the
Louise.
the pressure that people feel today,
Yeah.
too. So I was trying to compare it with youth at risk today, and
Uh-huh.
someone who actually was a published poet by 18 and had written all these things in England and killed himself because he wasn't successful. And I
Huh.
thought, I was trying to parallel it with, someone today, and have it cut back and forth, or even the same boy. But I've never finished the play. I can't tell you how much research. There's a lot of those plays of mine that they're still unfinished.
Huh.
There was one about the dark ladies of the sonnets that I was writing. Who was the
Uh,
dark lady? That kind of. I don't know. Lots of ideas sitting there, and but I never finished that play, which was based on a painting.
yeah.
And I think there was another one, but I can't remember what it was, that was based on a painting. So anyway,
Now, your Southern comedies with Southern characters. I read an article that you were quoted. It was from 1981, I
oh
think, New
dear.
York Times, maybe, where you were quoted, and it rang so true to me that you said that the people don't quite understand that these eccentric characters actually exist and they actually behave this way. I'm not adding to this too much.
No,
And I think a lot of people from a lot of different parts of the country may think, "Oh, that's too broad."
not at
But
all.
it
No.
is not. Yeah. Do you have any favorite characters of yours that are like the most
Well,
eccentric?
I think, one of my favorite plays, and it's still done a lot. There was the third play, the one that opened on Broadway, was two one acts, which don't ever open one acts on Broadway. We were crazy, but
I have a couple of favorite ones though.
uh,
Typists and the Tiger,
true,
Murray Shizgel. I thought that works pretty well,
that
but
did work. That
I'm
did
with
work,
you.
and no,
Hmm.
and there have been evenings that did work. I think there's an Anthony Schaefer, like, black comedy, White Lies, but
Yeah.
the and the Patio Porch was a
Hmm.
two with two one acts, And I still to this day love Porch, which was based on my mother and sister. They're both gone now, so I can talk about them. At the time, they would they went to the theater and saw it, and they were like, "Oh my!" It's like he's recorded our conversation,
Right.
you know. And I'm sure you get that too. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I don't invite the people whose conversations I've recorded.
Well, I didn't invite them. It's unfortunate that the little theater in my hometown would end up doing them. And then how do you keep everybody? And I didn't realize that when I started to write Porch, which is about, there's not a story in that play that's not one I haven't heard in my hometown. It's just that when stories get told over and over again, they get more elaborate or they get changed. So I was telling them the way I heard my mother and relatives tell them, which is not the truth, actually.
Right.
But then I didn't realize till I sat down in the theater that all of these people sitting there, you would say there was like a story in the play about an elephant named Black Diamond, which was actually a true story. But all the woman had to say was Black Diamond, and the audience was screaming with laughter without her telling the story. So they were so far ahead of me in terms of the references that it was insane. I've never heard anything like it. That I didn't really have to tell the stories; they all knew the story. So it was a fun experience.
Funny. Okay. Yeah, that's in okay. In your hometown.
It was the folklore of that hometown, basically. But nobody outside of that town knew those stories. Yeah. So it was a completely different experience when it was done like at Theater 3 in Dallas or other places.
Yeah.
You know. But yeah, I mean, it had a lot of productions, especially the one at Theater 3 was really good. That was Carol Cook and Ronnie Claire Edwards, and they played it in my hometown, and then also at Theater 3.
Really?
Yes.
That's cool.
Because Carol Cook, who's still a wonderful friend, brother lived in my hometown. So they opened it at the little theater in Corsicana, Texas, and then moved it to Theater 3. So they had their tryout in Corsicana.
Do you know, I almost set the Texas Devil in Corsicana.
Oh my gosh. Well, you know, it's a peculiar town being the fruitcake capital and all that. And I don't know. I mean, I have written a lot about it in my life, and there's probably more I will write, but it was a very peculiar place to grow up, but maybe not any more peculiar than any town in Texas. I don't know.
Yeah,
you know? Yeah. But I grew up with a family that would sit on the porch and tell stories, and that's a lot of where the storytelling comes from.
You also didn't have a playwriting degree. You didn't study playwriting at SMU. You studied storytelling your entire life.
I did, yes. And then at SMU, I really, besides acting, had done a lot of costuming. So my first job out of SMU was immediate. And this was also pure luck at the New York Shakespeare Festival, working at Shakespeare in the Park, building costumes. Except I really didn't know what I was doing. So, I mean, there's a difference between working on a little, sewing machine in Texas and seeing these Russian seamstresses on these industrial machines, and you can't understand a word anybody's saying to you.
Yeah.
And I had to build 4 gray velvet dresses for Romeo and Juliet at the park. And they came out at the dress rehearsal in Central Park and came apart at the seams. I didn't know what I was doing, in terms of, things complicated like bobbins and things like that on big machines. So I remember Theone Aldrich, who was the designer and ended up designing Chorus Line and many Broadway shows, came over and I was in tears. I just thought, okay, I might as well get out of here and go back to Texas. She said, stick with me, kid. I don't know how to sew either. and she was this big Broadway designer. Right. So she took me under her wing and I sat next to her all summer doing, handwork, sewing beads on and stuff, which is all she knew how to do other than design beautiful clothes.
Right.
But if she hadn't saved me, I would have been back on the next, bus to Texas or something.
Wow.
I know.
That's great.
I know. But I did start out at a good place,
Uh-huh.
the Shakespeare Festival. So,
Yeah. 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 Legendary.
yeah.
Now, as a playwright, how do you behave during a production? When you have something new happening and it's previews and opening nights and what's going on inside of you?
Fear, total fear. Because, um, you know, this as a writer, I'm watching the audience. I'm not watching the play.
Yeah.
So if they get the least bit restless or
Yes.
get up and leave, well, I'm destroyed. I'm totally destroyed, or something else will go wrong. I have a tendency because I don't sit through my plays. Rarely,
Yeah.
but most of the time, especially with a new play, I'm standing in the back and taking notes, and I just I'm probably a terrible audience member if I was sitting there because I'd probably be going, "Oh," or "What are you doing?" I'd be muttering. So I.
My wife will not sit next to me.
Well, I understand
Yeah.
what Kim is feeling because I'm a wreck. I'm a wreck. So
Uh-huh.
I think it's I don't remember ever being as scared and nervous as I am on when I'm watching a new play, especially. But still, I don't know what it is. I mean, it's. I really have at times, fled the theater just because I couldn't take anymore.
Yeah.
So, or go outside for a while and come back. As long as I can hear it, I'm okay. But there's something about I've often stood in the back just where I can hear, but
Mhm.
not seeing it. I don't know what it is. So,
Yeah. It's because you're not just seeing the play, you're seeing the audience. You're
yes,
seeing every little thing that they're not doing that you wish they were doing,
yes.
both actors and and audience, and you've lost control. Now, do you think that feeling, is that something that you write in spite of that, or is that part of what keeps you coming back to that?
Oh, interesting. No one's ever asked that. I don't think it keeps me coming back to it because I think it's a horrible feeling,
Yeah.
but I think it's in spite of. I think it's just, I know now I'm going to go through it.
Uh-huh.
So it's just part of the deal. Okay, I'm going to I have had directors, though, send me home from,
Just
from,
get out of here.
yeah. I remember I was working at the Old Globe in San Diego, and Jack O'Brien was directing a play of mine. And I think he just said, "Would you go back to Los Angeles for a few days and get away from it?"
Uh-huh.
Because I think I was, driving him crazy and
Uh-huh.
and making actors nervous. Not that I was saying anything, because I really respect, that I don't talk except to the director and all of
Right.
that. The theater protocol that we've learned. But I think it was just them watching me. I was probably just making them all crazy because I was probably squirming and
Mhm.
making grimaces and
Yes, making faces.
making
Yes.
faces. So he said, "Go away, just go away for a while." So, and that's the only time anyone's ever sent me away. But I've had directors come to me and said, you know, um, it'd be better if you weren't here.
Uh-huh.
And I think they think I make actors nervous. I don't do it intentionally, but maybe playwrights do make actors nervous. So
Yeah, I think they tend to watch you.
yes, because
Yeah.
because really good actors know, that you gave birth to this actually, and now
Yeah.
they're trying to do that also. And also they tend to want to ask you questions, and I'm happy to answer them, but I don't answer them unless the director asks them for the
Yeah.
actors or said you can ask them questions. It's a hard position to be in, I think, you know.
Yeah.
And especially if you're in a position also that if they open that up, then every designer has an opinion, then everybody has an opinion, and you're going, oh no. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
so I try to keep quiet and out of sight if possible. So
Yeah. The fear thing, I've always kind of looked at it as like skydiving. And
oh,
I'm
yeah,
terrified the parachute is not going to open. And then
yeah,
I'm elated when the parachute opens. And
yes.
there's
I
a
think
sense of that.
that's good. I think
Yeah.
that's a yeah. I agree with that. And I don't know. I don't know when. I can't remember, except maybe Vanities London, when I've looked at a play of mine and thought, um, that I was completely happy at the end with what I saw.
Hmm.
There's I mean, yes, Vanities in New York, I loved it,
Hmm.
but it went through a real process to get even where it was. But because we kept reworking the end of it for about 6 weeks, because we took the play between when it closed and workshop, we had a chance to go out of town with it to a theater in Long Island, which was luxurious because we
Hmm.
just could play with it for till it was going to open off Broadway. So I put in so many endings to the third scene that it was hilarious. Some nights we'd just be rolling on the floor with laughter with what we tried.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Oh, yeah. That's
we go,
fun.
I can't believe we made the actors do that tonight, or
Yeah.
the song that was playing at the end was just would crack us up.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We were just having fun,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is good.
Oh, absolutely. That's what it's about, man. Some of the best
Yeah,
stuff comes when you're having fun. I never, I feel like previews are never long enough, and I
right.
don't have enough time with everybody. It's just, it's a sketch of what I would like to have happen ultimately.
Yeah,
By the time the production catches up with the play, and then you
mhm,
realize where the play needs help, you know.
right. No, and we were lucky in that respect that we had a very good workshop that someone said we're going to move it off Broadway, but we had 6 weeks before the move happened.
Uh-huh.
And the fact that somebody let us go to a theater and perform it for 6 weeks out of town with nobody, no critics,
Yeah.
and taking the train to Long Island and doing it. And then when we opened in New York, I don't even know if we had two previews. We
Hmm.
probably did, but we just opened, and which was great. We were really ready to open, which I can only say about that show is the only one I've ever felt. There's nothing more we can do to it. This is it. It's ready.
Yeah.
Because every other time I can remember, we weren't ready.
Yeah.
And then I've worked on shows that even after you opened them, they were still being changed.
Yes.
You know,
Or
so
you want to change them. Yeah.
oh yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And I worked on a Broadway musical called Leader of the Pack
Uh-huh.
that was just a it was a mess beyond belief. Great songs, but should never have had a book to begin with. Should
Uh-huh.
have been a review. And we were supposed to preview like 2 weeks and open. It was 3 months later we were still previewing.
That's never good.
No, because they were scared to open. They were scared. Finally, the critics said, "We're coming.
Uh-huh.
You can't preview anymore." And of course, the reviews were horrible.
Mm.
But it played about 6 months. But once it opened, then they put songs back in that had been cut. They never stopped playing with it.
Mm.
And I thought I had a 2 week job to to rewrite a show, and it took 3 months
Yeah.
work for the same amount of money. So
Hey, there's that.
I
Yeah.
didn't, I thought I was just fixing something
Uh-huh.
instead of, we threw out so many books, it was hilarious. And so many costumes,
Yeah.
so many sets. It just was ridiculous.
Sets
So,
too. Huh. Now, one last thing before I let you go, that I was interested in. I recall from my youth seeing Vanities on HBO's standing room only. I had a couple of different shows that I saw in that situation that kind of set me on my way to appreciating the theater. Um, I caught maybe half of Vanities one time in, I don't know, 1986 as a playback from
mm,
the 80 um, early 80s production. Meredith Baxter Burney was in it. I remember that.
yes.
And what was processes like that? And then I didn't see. I looked it up, and there was also a made for TV movie about it. How the
Well,
difference between those things, like between you are writing a play for your audience that you're going to see enjoy it, and writing for people at home?
Well, the HBO production was something I was completely against,
Mm-hmm.
um, and had nothing really to do with other than trying to stop it. And finally, well, the reason was, it's kind of complicated, but it was bought for television by ABC, and
Mhm.
they made a pilot. So once your pilot is shot, the network owns it,
Mhm.
owns the property. They own the broadcast rights, but not the theater rights. So they never put the pilot on the air. I mean, they never did the series, but they did the pilot, and
Mhm.
it was. And so then at some point they sold it to Sir Lou Grade in Britain or something, who sold it to HBO. And so it was the first
Huh.
time a play had been filmed by HBO. And there was that series then called
Yeah.
Standing Room Only.
Oh, so that was the first one. I didn't realize that.
I think it was the first one. And what they didn't know um, was, you've got the actors acting in a theater projecting to the back row and a camera in their face. So it's sort of grotesque.
Mm-hmm.
The only person in it who was probably horrible in the theater doing it was Shelley Hack, who had never been on stage but had done Charlie's Angels forever.
Mm-hmm.
She knew how to work the camera. But Meredith Baxter Burney and Annette O'Toole were just screaming into
Yeah, I
the
remember Annette
camera.
O'Toole being very loud.
Very loud.
Very
and
loud.
and in the theater it was fun anyway. So I said, um, because they were filming the play, they only, it was at the Geffen Theater in Los Angeles, and they were only paying me theatrical rights because they didn't have to pay me anything, because uh,
Yeah.
ABC had sold it to HBO for $500,000, which I got nothing. So I was furious. So I said, I wouldn't let them change a word of the play for the production, because I always said somebody's going to do this on television with these real looking sets, and that's what they were doing.
Uh-huh.
And so they wanted to change a few things or cut some things, and I wouldn't let them. And finally, they paid me to shut up.
Hey.
So I said, because it was filming, because they couldn't change the words of the play because of the guild and the Dramatists Guild and stuff. And so it wasn't an adaptation, it was actually a filmed play.
Yeah.
So that's it. I never got royalties from it or anything except the theater royalties. But it's amazing though, because I thought it was horrible. But people who never saw the show any other way liked it.
Yeah,
and
I liked it.
It's on YouTube. The whole thing is on YouTube. And I would scream if I was getting any royalties off of it, but I'm not. So just let it be on YouTube.
Sure.
So, but it was but the problem now is people have wanted to go back and do a movie of it or something like that. They cannot because of the broadcast rights being tied up. All in perpetuity because of HBO, and HBO doesn't even have a copy of it, So it's weird. The copies are all like in people's collections or something. They never sold it. They never issued a CD so HBO was actually just part of a long, complicated thing. But now when people want to buy it to do a movie of it, we can't. The trail of who owns it is impossible to find.
Interesting.
Because Sir Lou Grade's gone, Heyday Productions that produced the pilot's gone, so we don't know. So nobody will touch it for a movie or anything. But what they can do, because as a writer, we always own our characters. I could write something completely new with the characters, or they could buy the musical, which is a completely different property.
Right. Right.
So one of the reasons of doing the musical was to kind of get it back, the broadcast rights back in my possession.
Yeah.
Because I'm a lot smarter now than I was then about, I said, oh, great. They're offering me $25,000. Sure. I'll sign this contract, which was a big mistake, about property. So
Huh.
You learn as you go,
Yeah. Yeah.
unless someone tells you what to do, which
Yeah.
I try to do with my students. I just warn them all the time, you know.
Well, I feel
So,
like the first time I had a contract offered to me for something like that, I think I reached out to you
oh, probably.
through email. I was like, Jack, I really have
What do we do?
people are, they're offering me this much money. Is that reasonable for what this is?
Oh,
Uh,
it's just insane. You know,
yeah.
I mean, thank goodness, you know, I didn't really have anybody other than an agent to tell me what to do. And, you know, and they want money.
They want that
So,
25,000 and
you know, and
yeah.
I didn't know, I don't even remember selling it to ABC, whatever it was. I
Yeah.
wrote the pilot, and it, you know, it's never been seen, but it was a pretty good idea for a show. It happened to be around the same time as Laverne and Shirley and
Oh,
all of that. So they were actually focused, they wanted to focus it on the teenage years, which I thought were the least interesting.
yeah.
And I
It's
said,
set up.
yeah. And I said, you know, how it should have been done. And I said at the time was as an hour series about three women who went to school together, who went to college together. It should have been more like Sex in the City. It should have
Mm,
been more women who get together for coffee or something, and then you can flash back in their lives. You can go forward, you know.
yeah.
Uh, it really should have been more of a dramatic series than a sitcom.
Hmm.
So anyway, it um,
Hmm.
I'm not upset about it anymore. I kind of find it amusing, you
Yeah.
know. But I was upset when they put it on HBO for sure.
Interesting. Well, sorry to bring that up.
No, it doesn't upset me now at all. I'm kind of
I
glad
liked it.
it's there.
I thought it was
So
fun.
yeah, and a lot of people like it. I
Uh-huh.
think I just, you know, if especially if they've never seen the show, they like it. You know,
Yeah.
if they've never seen it on stage, especially,
Right. And I
or if it's
had
the
not.
first time they see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
you know, there've been some really bad productions, much worse than HBO.
Yeah.
So,
The other one, the film staging that caught my interest before I ever started doing theater was the True West with Gary Sinise and John Malkovich.
mhm,
And it was kind of the same thing where I've gone back and watched pieces of that and they're yelling the entire time with the
mhm,
camera. You know, it doesn't quite work, but there's still something about it uh, if you know you know if you like things on
yeah.
stage, you can watch it and sort of forgive those things.
Well, it
That
was,
was my take.
yeah, and it was interesting at the time. You think, well, and it's coming back a little bit now because we're having to do plays
Yeah, we
on
have to.
Zoom. Um, that HBO was actually filming live plays.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, I don't know if anybody's going to do that now if it wasn't necessary to kind of try to figure out something new. But
Yeah.
at that time, you know, there were a lot of them that they did. Uh,
Hmm.
but I think we were the first one, if not the second one, and they really didn't know how to do it. They were learning how to do it.
Right.
You know,
Right.
just because of that yelling into the camera. So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway. I'm glad it exists. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not unhappy it exists. I just wish it were a little bit better than it is. So.
Yeah. I get you. All right. So I'll let you go. The one last thing I want to say: do you have any parting shots, advice for aspiring writers? Any elevator
Um,
pitches you give them about the writing life?
no, I mean, I think you learn writing by doing it.
Uh-huh.
I really do. It's I mean, my classes here are more like workshops. I just make them write constantly, as opposed to teaching how to do it. Just do it, and then and read it out loud and get over that fear,
Hmm.
and get some feedback. And I think, you know, part of it is I'm not really sure you can teach it as much as just read plays, see plays, you know. But as far as everybody, I think could write a play.
Hmm.
You know, it's just some might be better than others, but I don't know. I'm trying to get my students over the fear of writing to begin with, because a lot of my students, if they're not theater people, they're creative writing people, and
Uh-huh.
they don't know. They think dialogue is scary and all this, and
Yeah.
so um, I just think everybody should write a play. I really do. If for nothing else but for their own enjoyment. Just
Uh-huh.
do what we did. Listen to your relatives and write it all down.
Yeah.
You know, I've I stole everything from them at the beginning. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's all about, rhythms and voices. And I always write hearing people, certain voices in my head, of mostly from actors I know, and it'll be a low voice, a high voice. It's that
Mhm.
music that you hear in your head you're trying to write. So
Yeah, that
yeah.
helps, especially if you learn an actor's sense of timing.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
because timing has so much to do with, especially getting laughs.
Yeah. I can hear them saying the lines,
Yeah.
as I write them. They may never play the role or even know but
Yeah.
I use them a lot
Hmm.
because, and I do like a high voice next to a low voice and those kind of things.
Hmm.
So,
Well, that's good.
yeah, I just try to hear the music of it,
Yeah.
Anyway, but I
Well,
think everybody should write. So
yes. Yes.
yes. All right.
Not everybody. I don't want any competition.
No, that's true. That's true. No, I wouldn't like that
Yeah.
either.
Yeah. People,
But
there's a lot of writers in Dallas these days.
oh yes.
There are a lot of writers in Dallas these days, and people ask me, "Wow, that's so different than 15 years ago when you started doing these things." I'm like, "It's terrible. Everybody, stop it.
Yeah.
Just me.
Yes,
I don't
I
want."
think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I just don't. Yeah, we don't need more competition for
No.
sure.
No. No. No.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
Jack. Well, it
Thank
was
you.
really a pleasure to catch up with you and fun to
Yeah.
talk to you about this stuff and to learn more about it.
Absolutely, and I hope we don't go so long without seeing each other.
Yeah, let's not.
So you're afraid
Okay,
of old
good.
man Satan.